Discussion keeps the world turning.
This is Round Table.
You're listening to Round Table. I'm Steve Hatherley. And coming up, today we continue the special series on Zhuangzi, about one of the most influential philosophers of ancient China. Who was Zhuangzi? And what life lessons can we still draw from his centuries-old wisdom? In this series, we'll explore some of the most fascinating stories from Zhuangzi and reflect on what they reveal about how we live, think, and choose. On today's show, we bring you the story Cook Ding, the expert ox butcher. It's a story about learning and practice.
Lord Wenhui was breathless as he watched Cook Ding cutting upon an ox. He had never known that his royal chef was a master of blade. Every touch he made was of subtlety and accuracy of God knows how. His knife knew the ways into the bones and joints, yet just narrowly avoiding them. Wherever the knife went, flesh fell from the bones. Cook Ding slithered his knife gracefully with a zing, as if his hand and blades were dancing in perfect rhythm. Zip, zoop, a shoulder is off. Zip, zoop, the feet are apart. And zip, zoop, all beef available on the cutting board.
This is marvelous. How did you become such an expert?
Cook Ding laid down his knife and explained that it was not just about skills.
This goes beyond mere skills. The first time I did the job, all I could see was the ox itself. After 3 years, I no longer saw the whole ox but different body parts. And now I look at the ox with my mind, not my eyes. I go along with the anatomy of oxen, cut into the gaps between the muscles and bones, and guide the knife through the huge hollows between the bone joints. So, my knife knows the way, or the different ways, and never really touches the smallest ligament or tendon, not to mention bone joints.
The Lord looked at the knife with curiosity.
Your knife is so shiny. Is it new, or did you just sharpen it?
To his surprise, the answer was no.
A good cook changes his knife once a year because he cuts. An ordinary cook changes his knife once a month because he hacks. Their knives wear and tear. But look at mine. I've had it for 19 years and have cut up thousands of oxen with it, and yet the blade is as sharp and shiny as new. It's not difficult. There are spaces between the joints and plenty of room for a thin blade to get through. Even if it has been used for 19 years and have cut up thousands of oxen with it, its blade is still as good as when it first came from the grindstone.
Lord Wenhui became more interested.
You really are a master cook who can do the job to perfection. What have you found difficult about carving an ox? And how do you deal with these difficulties?
Whenever my knife comes to a complicated part of the ox, I tell myself to watch out and be careful. I keep my eyes on what I'm doing, work very slowly, and move the knife with the greatest subtlety until, flop, the whole thing comes apart like a clot of earth crumbling to the ground.
The king was inspired by Cook Ding's words.
Excellent. Now I learned how to care for life.
Know the thing, and know the way to deal with it. Cook Ding had a superb understanding of the body structure of an animal. He could avoid the technical difficulties and find gaps to get through. Practice makes perfect, thus mastering the objective laws of doing anything and achieving craftsmanship. This is also the same to life attitudes. Avoid conflicts and struggles and protect ourselves. That, too, requires caution and wisdom.
That was Cook Ding, the expert ox butcher from our special series Zhuangzi. Coming up next, Yushun and Tianlu will share their own interpretations and takeaways from this story.
What's up, everybody? This is Yu Shun from Roundtable.
This is Tianlu from the Beijing Hour.
So, from this story, I think one sentence that has always been lingering in my mind when I was listening to the story was practice makes perfect. The story, I think, it is illustrating that mastery in many fields comes from years of practice and developing a deep understanding of the subject matter. In this story, Cook Ding's progression from seeing the ox as a whole to understanding its anatomy and cutting with precision shows that expertise is achieved through a lot of dedication and experience. Here's what I was thinking because, Cook Ding became thoroughly familiar with the parts of an ox through his constant practice. And I've always been thinking, the Chinese saying, it takes 10 years of work behind the scenes to make a minute of performance on stage, right? I think you heard that, Tianlu. 台上1分钟，台下10年功.
Yeah.
So, just like a lot of these musicians and pianists, for example, through long hours of practice can smoothly play complex pieces. For example, famous pianists like Lang started practicing from a really young age. And we know that a lot of instruments, if you would like to learn instruments and you would like to master an instrument, you need to spend a lot of years on it. And you need a saying called 童子功, which means you need to learn it from a really, really young age. And I think that is also reflecting the fact that, through continuous practice, if you would like to achieve that kind of world-class performance levels, continuous practice is kind of necessary. Of course, we know that this is not that easy. So there have been many idioms and stories in China since ancient times that, emphasize perseverance. And I believe these stories share a common theme, and which is to involve long-time practice.
I know, but this level of mastery, you said, can have some limitations. Even though Cook Ding's story and Lang story we mentioned before shows how practice can make you an expert, those skills might not fit into today's world. For example, let's say a traditional photographer. They can practice their skills a lot and to become a very professional one. But the world is changing so quickly, and nowadays photographers even need to know how to edit the photos rather than just taking the photos. If they don't learn digital photography and editing, they could fall behind. And the society is developing so fast, like what I said before, even the photographers who knows the digital skills and editing very well, it doesn't mean that they are very competitive in this kind of industry.
Yes, I understand. Of course, modern society is different from the era in the story, right? But similarly, if we consider, the refinement of a single skill, which is photo shooting or videography, it also requires continuous progress and practice, right?
Yeah, but what I mean is we can't just rely on one skill. Nowadays, another new type of studio becomes quite trendy. I can see many fancy studios in the shopping malls with delicate decorations. Photographers there even help you to do makeup. They help you pick up the right clothing and taking photos, of course. And they even have very good Photoshop skills. So basically, this kind of studio is very attractive, and actually I think it's more attractive and more trendy than the traditional one. So it makes more money, comparing with the studios that just take photos and edit them. So while being really good at one thing is great, but I think having a mix of skills and knowledge is more important today, rather than solely relying on one skill, especially when everything is changing so quickly nowadays.
I get what you mean. Let's just talk about photography industry. If your technique, I was thinking, is superb at the most critical step, which is shooting, right? Photo shooting or video taking, then I believe all of these preparation or post-production services or editing that you said, I think these will be much easier, right? Because it is kind of important that you know how to do the lighting, know how to do the angle. So in this way, of course, it is very important that you do all of these preparation and have good looking clothes. But when you are having a good skill of photo shooting, I think maybe sometimes even you wear ugly clothes, you can look better with a good photographer. But anyway, I think this is very similar to, I think, the second philosophy that I gleaned from this story, which is, the idea of getting the simplicity of things. By mastering the underlying principles of things, one can increase their efficiency. So in this story, Cook Ding's method of cutting the ox with such ease and fluidity reflects the philosophy that, mastery often involves simplifying complex tasks, right? His approach reduces the ox to its, fundamental components. Is actually reflecting that mastery often comes from making the complex seem simple.
But what he dealt with is just an ox. It's not that complex.
Of course, it is complex. There are so many bones, and how to use the knives to cut it and make it sharpen as new. It is, of course, we're talking about just cutting ox, but it is kind of the philosophy or idea that can be reflected in modern society, I think.
But I think in modern society, the problems we face nowadays are way more complicated than just dealing with an ox.
Okay, let's make an example in the modern society. I was thinking mathematics. So normally, mathematic teachers, they will have that kind of skill, or this is kind of the process. They help students gradually master their knowledge by breaking down all of these complex, no matter it's formula or course content, into smaller and more easily understood parts. Okay. I remember in my middle school, the long math questions we did often essentially used the same formulas, actually, right? By breaking down these problems and extracting the, underlying principles, whether it was one formula or multiple, we could solve them all by just looking at the question and then get the core formula that it's going to be used. So I was thinking the method makes the learning process smoother and reduce the cognitive burden on students. And in this way, students can actually grasp and master this kind of way to learn to solve the mathematical questions. Also, in this way, similarly, I believe this also demonstrates the importance of mastering the underlying or the core principles of things.
Okay, I can understand your logic. But if we just simplify complicated things or break them down into simpler or smaller parts to complete a task or a huge project, I think that's a bit too idealistic.
Oh.
We need more innovation, creativity, and maybe an open mind.
Yes.
Like, we can't just simplify things. Sometimes the problems we face are way more complicated, like what I said before. And that's why I think we need to try divergent thinking and breakthroughs. Understanding and managing these complexities rather than just simplifying them might be the key to true proficiency. Let's say I love lychees a lot, and I used to buy them from the supermarket, but they were rarely fresh, so I have to pick up them very, very carefully to avoid rotten ones.
Okay.
And recently, a friend from Shenzhen sent me a box of lychees, which is super, super fresh and tasty and sweet and juicy.
Right.
So I was surprised, and I asked her, how can you get like this kind of very fresh lychees? And she said Shenzhen is famous for this kind of fruit, and in the past, the local farmers there would worry the lychee season, actually, because, for example, when they grow the lychees and do the harvesting, and they just sell them nearby, or they have to sell them to the supermarket. So the destiny of the lychees is wait the customers to come and to buy them.
Okay.
And the process took too long, so the freshness of the lychees already disappear.
Oh.
So they try to break the traditional methods and try to use the social media platforms like doing live streaming. And with the live streaming, the people can order online and the farmers just dispatch the products directly and keeping the lychees very fresh, and they can also increase the sales of the lychees. And the farmers also break the geographic limits through live streaming or online sales. The lychees can be sold nationwide and selling
with all
them.
of these cold chain deliveries, right?
Yeah, not only nationwide, even internationally.
Oh.
So this shift has expanded their market and increased the value of their products. That's why I think simplicity is not that suitable for the sales of agricultural products. If the farmers just simply focus on like growing and selling them locally nearby and don't have some divergent thinking, the traditional way will not work as well as in the past. On the opposite, they learned to adapt to the fast changing society. For example, they learned the new technologies and learned how to use the social media platforms, how to do online sales. They also learned to manage the complexity of our society. So that's why I think innovation and creativity are more important, as expanding new sales channels can bring the farmers more benefits. To achieve the true proficiency, we need diverse and flexible strategies to navigate the complex environments rather than just simplifying the environments.
I get it. But actually, getting things from complexity to simplicity also require innovation and creativity, to be honest. But I believe, integrating all of these live streaming and international or domestic logistics, it also requires every single step to be, simplified and focus on the quality of their service. So I was thinking, by breaking down each step, this is the way that you can offer better quality of service to your customers.
Of course, simplicity is important, but for example, let's go back to cooking story. It simplifies things and make them seem very easy to handle, but it might ignore the diversity and complexity of modern life and work. And let's say entrepreneurs, they might focus on one product or service, but the market demands are constantly changing. So if they don't follow the steps or keep up with the changing society, they might fall behind. For example, let's say the Apple. Many people know they produce iPhone, right? But they don't just produce iPhone. They also have MacBook, they also have iPad, Apple Watch, and
Vision Pro.
Yeah, Vision Pro. So, which I think is very cool, actually.
Yeah, of course.
And let's look at Huawei. They don't just sell mobile phones and laptops. Nowadays, they even sell electric cars.
Home appliances and everything.
Yes. So I think simplicity, of course, is good, but simplistic approaches might not yield the best results. Like, things need to be diversified so that they can develop better.
In this way, I think what we are discussing are all connected and intertwined in some way.
Yes, like you said, it's intertwined. So simplicity and complexity are both very important to us. So we can try to use different ways to solve the problems.
Right. Sometimes it is only by confronting, complexity head on and considering problems comprehensively that we can uncover the essence and the simplicity of things, right? And of course, this requires, I think, the investment of time, energy, and reflection, and also it necessitates innovation and awareness to adapt to the times. That also brings us to the end of today's discussion. As we conclude our conversation, we also want your opinions, or perhaps what lessons did you draw from this story? We encourage you to continue this discussion and stay tuned for more thought-provoking topics.
That was Yushun and Tianlu discussing their takeaways from the story Cook Ding, the Expert Ox Butcher, as part of our Zhuangzi series. If you liked this story and want to explore more on Chinese philosophy, simply search Sage and Youth Debating Zhuangzi's Tao on your favorite podcast platform. That brings us to the end of today's roundtable. We'd love to hear your thoughts on our topics today, so leave us a comment wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts or send us an email to roundtablepodcast@qq.com. Thanks for tuning in. You can always find us at Apple Podcasts by searching Roundtable China. I'm Steve, and we'll see you next time.